Hi everyone. So today we're going to be reviewing scenes 3 and 4 of Act 2 of The Tragedy of Macbeth. The first literary device or theme that we're going to be covering is Shakespeare's use of disturbance in the macrocosm. So disturbance in the macrocosm occurs when something so bad in the small world of human beings happens that the natural world reacts to it. So, and Shakespeare has used this before, like in the tragedy of Julius Caesar. We can take a look at where he's done this. So, right before Julius Caesar is killed, um, we see the characters talking about the crazy things that they've seen. Casca says, "Are you not moved when all the sway of earth shakes like a thing unfirm?" So there's an earthquake. I've seen tempests when the scolding winds have rived the knotty oaks. I have seen the ambitious ocean swell and rage and foam to be exalted with threatening clouds. So he's seen all these crazy things happen. But never till tonight, never till now did I go through a tempest or a storm dropping fire. Either there is a civil strife in heaven, or else the world, too saucy with the gods, incenses them to send destruction. Where we get this idea is that the actions of man, there's a relationship between those actions and the reactions of the gods. Um, Cicero goes on and he says, "Well, what else did you see? I saw a common slave, you know him well by sight, held up his left hand, which did flame and burn like 20 torches joined, and yet his hand, not sensible of fire, remained unscorched." So he talks about this guy who's it's a phenomenon. He holds up his hand and it's flaming and burning, but his skin isn't affected. So Shakespeare uses these things in many of his tragedies. In Macbeth, we see it four times in these two scenes. Banquo's observation of the night sky in the previous scene, scene one, where he says, "There's husbandry in heaven, their candles are all out." Macbeth's observation in the same scene, "Now over the one half world, nature seems dead." Lennox's recap of the storm the night before, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death. And then the old man and Ross's conversation about the weather phenomenon that has taken place since Duncan's murder. So we're going to go over all four of these quotes, and then we're going to talk about why these things exist. So the first time that we see disturbance in the macrocosm occur is when Banquo's to Fleance, and he says that, "Hold, take my sword. There's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out." So what he's saying is that the gods are being cheap and they're not turning any of their stars on. Their candles are all out. Well, what is the connection there? So if you remember, Macbeth says, "Stars, hide your fires, light not lights see my black and deep desires. The eye winketh the hand, yet let that be, which the eye fears when it is done to see." So he has all these murderous thoughts, and he's asking the gods, "Turn your lights out. I don't want you to see what I'm doing." And then we see Banquo remarks that there's husbandry in heaven. So it seems like the gods listen to Macbeth, because when he's having his fatal vision soliloquy, he mentions, "Now over the one half world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep." So what he's saying is the lights all are out, and now it's time to do evil things. And this is Macbeth's affirmation that I'm ready to do this. And he, as we talked about last tutorial, he asked the earth, "Hear not my steps." So there's always this relationship between human beings and their request to the natural world or the gods to aid them, whether they're doing something good or doing something terrible. So then the murder happens, and Macbeth and Lady Macbeth discuss how they're going to go about their business. And And then all these Scottish thanes arrive. And Lennox says to Macbeth, just making conversation, "The night has been unruly where we lay. Our chimneys were blown down, as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events, new haps to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamoured the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverish and did shake." So we see all these different types of phenomena. For instance, lamentings heard in the air. So people were screaming out strange things, strange screams of death. Um, the obscure bird. Who is the obscure bird? The owl. He clamored the livelong night. And then we have his reference of an earthquake. So the murder of Duncan was so terrible that all these bad things happened. The next day or sometime later, when an old man who could be a priest or just some other uh, peasant is speaking to Ross, and he says, "Three score and 10." So a score is 20 years, and 10 years, so that's 70 years. So this man is probably 70. In my 70 years, I can remember well within the volume of which I have seen Hours Dreadful and Things Strange. So similar to Casca speaking in Julius Caesar, I've seen crazy things in my time. But this sore night has trifled former knowings. This sore night, this terrible night, I've never seen anything like it before. And Rawls comments, "Yeah, the heavens are troubled with man's act, threaten his bloody stage." And here we see a little bit of metafiction, because they're referring to a stage and the actors are on a stage. But he talks about a solar eclipse here, because by clock it's day, and yet dark night strangles the traveling lamp. What is the traveling lamp? It's the sun. And he says, is its night's predominance, or the day's shame that darkness does face of earth and tomb, when living light should kiss it? It should be light out, but it's dark. And he says, "Yeah, last Tuesday a falcon towered in her pride of place, was by a mousing hawked at and killed." So an owl killed a falcon. You usually wouldn't see that. And Ross comments, "Yeah, and Duncan's horses broke free from their stalls and flung out as they made war with mankind." And the old man says, "Yes, it is said they ate each other." So here we see all these unnatural things. And why do this? Well, let's go over Shakespeare's reasoning. Unlike a novel, there is no narrator, so there's no like person, some unnamed narrator, some omniscient presence commenting on how bad things are. So they need the natural world to comment on those things. Additionally, it signifies to the audience that morality, what's right and wrong, has been compromised. So Macbeth killing the righteous Duncan is an example of morality being compromised. It mirrors the internal conflict present in the character. So the fact that the world is at odds with itself and it's raining fire and shaking, well, this shows us the torrid state of Macbeth. And it also suggests that there is a relationship between the natural world and mankind. And this creates like a supernatural feel to Shakespeare's dramas. So we're going to be moving into our next theme, which is comedy in Macbeth. So we're going to be going over the porter. Um, and the porter, he appears at the beginning of scene 3, and he's going to act as the host of a comedy show. When you guys are old enough and you can go to a comedy club, you'll see that, usually there might be like 2 to 3 acts, but in between those acts, in that bookend those acts and during those acts, there will be a host that will come out. And this will be like a comic that's just getting his start. And this comic is somebody that just works for tips. It's kind of like um, it's kind of like the host of a party, an MC. And then the porter will have a conversation with Macduff, and Macduff is an aristocrat, and the porter is a commoner. And you'll see that the porter will get the best of Macduff, and then Macbeth's quick little response to Lennox's recap of the night's events. He says, "'Twas a rough night." So we're going to go over all 3 of these things, and we're going to talk about why they're present in the act. So if you guys turn on like a Family Guy episode or another, comedic cartoon or something like that, the humor is right in your face. You really don't have to figure out the joke. But and there's a lot of times it's really lewd and crude. And Shakespeare has the same type of humor in his plays, but he doesn't directly give it to you. You have to figure it out. And for sake of my job, I'm not going to go over and explicitly explain all of the jokes the porter makes. But if you do some close reading, you'll see that they're very inappropriate. So the porter comes in and he's doing a knock knock joke. So some people are knocking at the door. We know that it's the Scottish Thanes. And he says in a very comical voice, "Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? Here's a farmer that hanged himself in the expectation of plenty. Come in time, have napkins enough about you. Here, you'll sweat for it." And we see he's acting as if he is the porter of Hellgate. He is Charon in Greek mythology. He's the one down in Hades, and he's making his way across the river Styx, and he has his little dog with him. And then he goes through all these people that are knocking on Hell's Gate, and he's letting them in. And this is all comical and imaginary. Um, and then we get to the conversation between Macduff and the porter. And in this conversation, Macduff is going to be playing the straight man, and the porter is going to be playing the funny man. So in a knock knock joke, the straight man is the person who is being asked the question to. So knock knock is the guy who says knock knock is the funny man, and the person who says who's there is the straight man. So the joke that he's saying is that drink or to imbibe alcohol is a great provoker of three things. And Macduff plays along with the joke. What three things does drink especially provoke? And then he goes into these very inappropriate, this very inappropriate answer. And so I'll let you explore that yourself and find out what's so inappropriate about it. And then we have a little bit of a wordplay right here. I believe drink gave thee the lie last night. So we're going to have a little wordplay on this word lie because we know that it can mean a bunch of different things. And he says, "It did, sir, in the very throat on me, but I requited him for his lie, and I think being too strong for him, though he took up my leg sometimes, yet I made a shift to cast him." So he says it doesn't matter how tired alcohol made me, I was able to defeat it. Um, and then that's the end of the joke. And if you watch some of the performances of the porter, you'll see that he does a lot of really inappropriate sexual gestures. He urinates, and then we'll talk about why he does all these things. And then we already went over this quote, but after Lennox talks about how terrible the night was before, Macbeth, in a very dark humor way, and it's a joke that only he gets, like, "Yeah, it was a rough night, man." Like Lennox is complaining that it was such a terrible night and that his sleep was interrupted, when he has no idea the type of night that Macbeth had, because Macbeth, as you remember, murdered Duncan, and he heard all of these terrible things, lamentings in the air, and he heard the guards speaking to him, and he was thinking back to, "Am I ever going to be able to sleep again?" So why do these things exist in the play? Why have comedy in the play? Well, it serves as a juxtaposition to the tragedy. So imagine yourself in a hot tub, and then right after you're being in the hot tub, you jump in the cold pool. Well, the pool didn't all of a sudden get ice cold. It's that you went from one extreme to the next. So when we have a terrible scene, like Macbeth's reaction to the murder of Duncan, and then we have a really funny scene, and then we follow that by another terrible scene, the finding of Duncan's body, it makes the tragic scene seem that much more tragic. Okay, so why else do we have comedy in the play? Well, at the Globe Theater, there was two types of patrons, people who paid to see the play. There were the groundlings and the aristocracy. And the aristocracy, they sat up top in the balcony. And the groundlings, they sat on the ground. And they would be down there, and these were mostly illiterate people. And they'd be down there, and they would be had their drinks. They would have prostitutes would be running through the stage, um, and it got pretty wild. So Shakespeare needs to have this inappropriate humor to appeal to the lower classes. Additionally, a lot of times in Shakespeare's plays, whenever this comedy is present, we always see like a commoner getting the best of a member of the aristocracy. So the porter is getting the best of Macduff. In Hamlet, we see this with the gravedigger as he gets the best of Hamlet and Horatio. In Romeo and Juliet, there's another scene that's very similar. So the next theme that we're going to take a look at is unreliable protagonist. And the questions we're going to ask ourselves is, what is Macbeth's true feelings about the murder of Duncan? And after the other Thanes discover that Duncan was killed, are Macbeth's reactions sincere or feigned? So let's take a look at how this breaks down. So Macduff finds Duncan murdered and he says, "Awake, awake, ring the alarm bell. Murder and treason, Banquo and Donalbain. Malcolm, awake. Shake off this downy sleep. Death's counterfeit, and look on death itself. Up, up, and see the great doom's image." So he is sincerely reacting. This is a terrible event. And Lady Macbeth, very, her hair is probably um, everywhere, and she's in her nightgown, and she goes, "What's the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of this house? Speak, speak." And we have a lot of irony here because Macduff says, "Oh, gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell." Why is that so ironic? Because she's not a gentle woman. Um, and she is the one that put in place this murder. And Lady Macbeth is doing a great acting job. She's right in the middle. She's not acting as if she knew this was going to happen, and she's not overacting. Macbeth does not do the same because he says, "Had I died but an hour before this chance, I'd lived a blessed time. From this instant, there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys." Like he's overacting now. It'd be like if you broke a lamp and your mom came down the steps and you were really acting surprised. "Oh, I don't know what happened." Your mom would be able to figure out pretty quickly that you broke the lamp and that you're acting. Macbeth is doing the same thing here. Let's think about what he says. "Had I died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time." So what he's saying is if he died before this, he'd be a blessed man. Well, what's the opposite of blessed? It's cursed. And we know that he is cursed. And he even envies Duncan and he says, "I wish I could wake you up." So we see that Macbeth is in serious regret right now. So what is he saying here? Is this an act or does he really feel this? Well, I think it's a little bit of both. So who killed him? Those of his chamber done it. So obviously they want to question him. And Macbeth says, "Oh, yet I do repent me of my fury. I did kill them." Huh. Well, isn't it really convenient that Duncan sleeps over your house and then the next morning he wakes up and the guards who we see murdered him, you killed them? So there's going to be a lot of suspect, a lot of suspicion put on Macbeth right now. And Macduff asks, "Wherefore did you so?" This does not mean where did you do this. It means why did you do this. So when Juliet says, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" She's saying not where are you Romeo, but why are you Romeo? Why are you a Montague? And Macbeth answers his question, well, who can be wise, amazed, temperate, furious, loyal, and neutral in a moment? No man. The expedition of my violent love outrun the palsar, reason. So when he's saying this, I'm wondering, this violent love, who did he have violent love for? Was it Duncan or was it his wife? Um, And he really knows what Duncan looks like. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. Yeah, of course you know such intimate details about what Duncan looks like because you murdered him. So as Macbeth is saying this, Lady Macbeth is realizing Macbeth, you are overacting. You're doing too good of a job. Remember, she told him, look like the serpent, look like the flower, but be the serpent under it. Well, he's doing too good of a job of looking like the flower because he's overreacting. The other men, they are not acting like this. So what does Lady Macbeth do? She faints. Why? She faints to get the attention off of Macbeth. Look to the lady. So back to our why does this unreliable protagonist exist? Well, it reveals to the audience that Macbeth's morality is changing. Um, we see he's a very complex character because he's loyal to his wife, but he also has incredible regret to the murder of Duncan, who he at one point was loyal to. And additionally, this mirrors the confusion of Macbeth with the confusion of the audience. Macbeth is very confused right now. So Shakespeare wants Macbeth's confusion to mirror your confusion. Macbeth doesn't know how to feel, and he wants the audience not to know how to feel about Macbeth or how Macbeth is feeling. Just some quick plot points that we can talk about. Malcolm and Donalbain will have this private conversation and say, why are we holding our tongues? This argument is ours. He was our father. And Donalbain says, we shouldn't speak anything here. The murderer is still here. Um, Banquo ends with, when we have our naked frailties hid that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. And then he says, in the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. So we see that Banquo is a loyal person, and we've seen that before when he's told Macbeth that he wouldn't cleave to his consent. Um, and then we find out that Malcolm is going to go to England, Donalbain will go to Ireland, and that will allow Macbeth to go right to the crown. So what happens in scene 4? They have this conversation, and we already went over it, that things are really bad, disturbance in the macrocosm, and then Macduff enters. And Ross says, is it known who done this more than bloody deed? Those that Macbeth has slain, the guards. Um, Alas, what good they couldn't pretend that they didn't do it because Macbeth killed them. Um, and Malcolm and Donalbain have stolen away and fled. And that's going to put suspicion of the murder on them. And he says, well, it's most likely that the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. And he says, he's already going to become king. He's already named. He's gone to Scone, which is a sacred place in Scotland where they crown their kings. Um, and Duncan's body is carried to Colmkill, which is the sacred storehouse of his predecessors. So this would be like the tombs in Game of Thrones where they keep all the Stark bodies. And Ross says, are you going to go to Scone to see Macbeth crowned? He goes, no, cousin, I'll to Fife. So Fife is his fiefdom. It's where he lives. And him going to Fife instead of going to Scone will will make him an adversary of Macbeth as well. So that's it for those two scenes, and check in soon when I do the next video. Have a nice day.